All right, so everything's formatted now, so you know what's up. We did HTML, we did CSS, now it's JavaScript. So I'm going to switch over to my script file, and where we did our menu thing last time, we're going to start right after that, and we're going to start doing something new. I'm going to pull this up a little bit so you don't have to see all the extra stuff, and we can see a little bit more. Now, what I'm going to tell you is that this is actually, this is the most complicated one we're going to be doing, so just kind of bear with me. First thing I want to do is just create variables to collect all of the elements that I need to do things to. Because unlike the previous ones where there's like one of something, the slider obviously has many items on it. So I want to get all the things like all the sliders and the buttons and all that stuff so that I can then adjust them using JavaScript. Okay, so we're going to create variables, and then in those variables, we're going to store the elements. So it's basically going to be, it's going to be the same thing we basically did here, but instead of just, same thing we did there actually. So we're just going to go ahead and name them accordingly. So we'll do a variable, and we'll say slides, and that will be equal to document dot get elements by class name, and the class name will be I don't know what happened there. It's by class name, and the class name will be slide. Okay, so it's going to grab all of our slides basically that way. And just to make this easier, I'm just going to copy and paste this. So Control C, and we're going to do 3 more of these. 1, 2, Control C, enter, Control V, enter, Control V. Okay, so the second one, we're going to give it a name. We're going to call it the dot button. So dot, btn, and it's going to look for the dots. All right, dot. And that's just going to allow us to, what we want to do is so we can highlight which frame that we're currently on. That's the reason why we need that one. Okay, then next, what we'll do is the previous button, prev btn, and then obviously the other one's going to be next btn. And you can probably guess we're going to be searching for previous, and we're going to be searching for next. Okay, so those are the basic things that we need to grab. We're going to put them into those, and then we're going to have those function. Okay. Alrighty. So the next thing after that is to actually create a function that's going to show our slides. So if you remember, if I click on the index here, first thing we did is we turned all our slides off. So I'm going to use JavaScript to just turn on one slide and the one that we want. Okay, so we're going to make a function that's basically going to do that. So if you remember, it's function. That's how we know it's a function. And then we're going to go ahead and name this one. We'll just call it show slide. And it is going to actually have some arguments or parameters that you send it. And it's basically whatever we send it is going to be called n. That's for slide number. That's why I said n. But basically, that's just going to be a variable. And anywhere I use n in here, it's when it gets called, that's what's going to send it. Currently, it's not getting called, but that's what's going to go in there. Okay. And then it's going to run. Everything is within these brackets. Let me make this bigger. Okay. Or we'll scroll it up. All right. So, what we're going to do is this. I'm going to set, so we're going to call this function and we're going to send it a number. And when it gets that number, it's going to show the slide basically accordingly. Okay. So first thing we're going to do is this. I'm just going to go ahead and after this guy, let's go down a couple here. We're going to do slides, right? Because that's if you look up there, slides. And then we're going to go dunk, and we're going to say, you know what, actually. So we're going to make this function. But when we make this function, if we were to run this right now, anything I put in here, it could be anything. It's actually not going to run because it's never being called, right? It's never being told to run. So actually, even before this, I was going to do this afterwards, but it actually makes sense to just do it now. We need to call this. So we're just going to call show slide, okay, and then like that. And what that does is says run show slide, and then here's the function that's going to run, which is show slide. But if you remember, see how here it has a parameter. So I need to send it an argument. So the argument I want to send it initially is this. What we're going to do is we're going to do a variable called slide num, and I'm going to set it initially equal to 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this slide num. So basically, what we're going to do is we're going to send it the number 1. So slide num is going to go where n is, because whatever's in here is what goes into here. And so wherever n is in here, it's actually slide num. All right. And in this case, I'm sending it 1. So the initial value that when I call this function that it's going to receive is 1, because I want it to show frame 1, basically. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do now is in here, to run that function, or to have it work, is going to be slides, because that was the name of the slides. We stored all the slides on here. And then we're going to say slides, and then we're going to say the slide num minus 1. Okay, slide num minus 1. Oink. Dot. Let's do this so it's a little easier. Dot style dot display. And we're going to set it equal to block. Okay, like that. Now, if I save this and we run this, Control R, you're going to see we're going to end up with our first frame. Yay! Okay, these aren't going to do anything because they aren't hooked up to anything. But it did show our first frame, because what it did is it said slide num minus 1. Now, why didn't I just put slide num in there, right? It's already 1. This made it 0, right? Because if we do slide num minus 1, that makes it actually 0. The reason why we do that is because the way the array is indexed, meaning the numbers that are associated with each object, it starts at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the first thing is actually 0. So in order to get the first picture that it stores, the first slide that it stores, is actually 0. So in order to get the first one, I do slide num minus 1. So basically, we just turn it on. That's what that does. Okay. However, that's not actually going to work that well for us, right? Because we need to basically make it so it does the part when you click on it and it does things, right? So what I'm going to do is make a function that's going to, when we click on basically the previous or next, it's going to call this show slide function, and we're going to send it a number. Initially, we sent it number 1, right? So this is going to run once, and it's going to say, okay, run it, give it the number 1, and show slide 1. That's what that's doing. But what I would like to do is actually have buttons that do the other stuff. So after this, because I need this to run first, we're going to go ahead and we are going to add a event listeners to the previous and next buttons. We'll do the next button first, and then we'll do the previous button, which will be the same thing, but just slightly different. Okay. So it'll be for, and then we're going to do I is equal to 0. All right. So we're going to just do a for loop, and then we'll say, while I is less than the previous btn dot length, and then I plus plus, and then it's going to run this loop for as long as whatever is in there is happening. Let's do this. Okay, so basically we're starting off with I is 0, and then we're going to say while I is less than the total length, add 1 to it every time we run the loop. Okay, now in this case you may notice that there's only one previous button, but if I had multiple carousels, this would work all the same. So it's only going to run the loop once because there is only one previous button. But I have to do this in order to get to, I guess I could probably just do 0, do button, then put a 0 in there, but we're going to do it like that. Okay. So now what we're going to do is for each iteration, so we'll say previous button, and then we're going to go I, which means the current one. So in the first time it runs through, it's going to be 0. Previous button. Then what we're going to do is add the event listener, right? Because what we're trying to do is make it that when we click on it, that it's going to do something. The event that we're going to be listening for is going to be click. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to make a function right inside of this. Instead of writing a function name and then having a separate function down here. I'm just going to go ahead and put it right inside of the event listener. Because in a weird way, it's actually a little bit simpler. So we're just going to literally write function, put empty, oops, I didn't want to put a 0, empty parentheses. Go ahead and open up brackets. And then all we're going to do is we're going to tell it to run show slide. And we're going to send it the slide num, which is the current slide number. Slide num, and then it's going to be plus equals 1, like that. And then we'll just collapse it like this. Okay. So, and then that needs to be like that. All right. It's a whole lot of buttons, right? So basically what it's going to do is that it's going to run a for loop, right? And the for loop is going to run for however many items are in previous button, which in this case, it's going to be once because there's only one thing, okay? And then when it runs through the loop, what it's going to do is on whatever I currently is, so this would be previous button, I would be, so in this case, it would be 0. It's going to add event listener. It's going to go click, and then it's going to run a function when it clicks that says show slide. So it's going to run show slide, and we're going to send it whatever the current slide number is plus 1. So in this case, what it means is that it will take whatever slide number. So it's 1 right now. It will take that 1 and it'll make it 2. So it'll send 2 here, and it's going to go slides, and it's going to put the 2 here, and then run. It's going to turn it on. Okay. So let's go ahead and test that out. Let's do Control S, and over here Control R, and now if I hit next, let's see, nothing's happening. So slow slide, blah blah blah. Yeah, so it looks like it's not working. Actually, is working because I'm an idiot. I did previous button. I meant to do next button on this one. So if you click on the previous button, which it's currently adding, so it's actually doing the opposite of what you want. But if I click on it, you're going to see, oh, it didn't work. It did. So you're seeing what it does is it's actually, it's turning on each one of those slides. But it's not turning off the other ones, right? Because you can see all it's doing is turning them to block. Because if you remember in our HTML, we turn them all off. So basically, every time I hit this button, it's going to the next slide and turning it on, but it's not turning the other ones off. So I need to do a couple things here. For one, I need to change this to next. So my bad on that. And next button, okay. And then I'm just going to go ahead and let's do this just to make this easier. I'm going to copy this whole thing, Control C, and we're going to do Enter Control V. And I need to move this back. If you actually hit Shift Tab, it will tab backwards. And go ahead and make these previous. So now prev, and make this one also prev. But what we want to do here is if you're doing previous, it's minus equals 1. Okay, so save that. And now if I refresh here, Control R, you can see if I hit next, it will indeed show them. And if I hit back, it's not going to do anything until I hit enough times, I think. No, it's not. Oh, because there is no. So the reason why that's not working is it actually makes sense. Is that right now we, so let's fix one thing first. So right now it's just adding those on each time. So what I want to do right off the bat is that every time it runs this, I want to turn all of the slides off, and then I'll turn this one on. So I'm actually just going to add a function to turn the slides off, back off. So whatever one is on, it'll just turn that one off. So what we're going to do is just go for, same thing as we've always done, I equals 0. And then we'll say while I is less than the slides dot length, so however many slides there are, and then every time you run the loop, add 1 to I. So it'll run for that many times. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and say slides, and each time, every time it runs this, right, it runs the next I, the next number, right? So the first time it runs this I represents 0, so it's going to be whatever slide is in the 0 position, so it's the first slide. Second time it runs it, it's going to add 1, so this I will become 1, So it'll be a 1 here, and then it will run slide 2. So slides I. Then we're just going to do dot style dot display, and we're going to set that equal to quotes none, like so. And then I'm just going to go like this just to make it smaller. So just like this does, because in the element, right, it has a style attribute property that we can adjust, and inside of that property, it can have this property, which is none, and it can have that property can have this value. Okay, so it's dot notation, and so basically this will turn all of them off, and this will just turn on whatever specific one I want. So now, if we save this, so Control S or Command S, and hit Control R, you'll notice that when I hit next, it'll do it, and they're right there. But notice that when I get to a certain distance, it doesn't work anymore. When I go back, I can start clicking. Where'd that button go? I don't know where that button went. My back. Oh, it's right here. I can start clicking back, and I can click forward. But when I go too far, nothing happens. And the reason why is that we're ending up with a number that's less than 0 or more than 2. So basically, we're ending up with numbers that are more than the number of slides that we have. So what we need to do is we actually need to set up something that will say, oh, if you're on the last slide, go back to the first slide. And if you're on the first slide and hitting previous, then go to the last slide, right? So basically, we need to make something that's going to tell it to switch from either side. So we'll actually put that above this. So what we're going to do is it's just going to be if n, which is the number, remember, that they send us. So if n is less than the slides dot length, okay? Or I'm sorry, if it's greater than. I don't know if I thought that didn't make sense. If it's greater than slides dot length, then what we're going to do is we're going to say the slide num is going to be equal to 1. Okay? Let's see if we can just want to compress this a little bit. So what that means is basically the slide length is the total number, right? So basically if the number that I have, so basically if I'm on the last one, is greater than the total of them, so it's a number that's past the amount, it's gonna go ahead and make the slide number 1. So it's gonna set it back to 1. So it's gonna put you on frame 1 again. All right, which is good. All right. Now what we're gonna do is we need to do it for the other direction, right? So we're gonna say if n is less than 1, and now it's gonna have to go to the end. It's gonna be slide num will be equal to the slides dot length. So remember, length represents the total number. So that number that it represents would be the position of the last one. So that will basically set it to the last frame. So now if we save it and preview it, Control R, you'll notice that if we hit the back button, it will go to slide 3, 2, and you can see we can keep going around the horn. And this one also works in the other direction. So basically it just resets it back to the other position. The last thing I'm going to do is just the little dots thing, which really honestly isn't as necessary, but I figured, why not? Okay. So all we're going to do is we can put this after these. We'll put a space there. And what we're going to do is this. We're going to say dot button and dot slide num -1. So basically there's the same number of buttons that there are slides, and so just like we're finding the slide number here and telling it to turn on, we're going to do the same thing here, but they're already on. What we want to do is we just want to make it look different. So if you remember in our CSS, I did the active here. We're basically going to turn on active, so it'll change the background color from its default, which is gray, to this lighter gray. So basically whatever one is the one that's we're currently on, the dot, it's going to make it a lighter gray. So we're not going to do what you see up there. What we're going to do is class name. We're going to add, so plus equals, we're going to add a class name called, you have to put the space in before it, active. Like that. So basically that will highlight, in essence, the button we're on. Now we're going to run into the exact same issue that we did up here with the whole thing where they'll eventually all become active. So I have to turn them all off every time too. So we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to take active off. Okay, so it's just going to be another for loop, and I'm just going to put it above it because that just makes sense to do. So it's going to be for I equals 0, and then while I is less than the dot btn dot length, so the number of buttons, and then I plus plus. Oops, actually I want to do it like this. Yeah, okay. What we're going to do is we're going to say dot btn, and we're going to do it to each one as it goes through. So this will be the first one here, and what we're going to apply to it is dot class name, and we're going to set it equal to the dot btn dot class name dot replace, and we're going to replace the we're going to place it with we're going to place active, and so actives on it with nothing, like that. And then let's just go like this. Okay, so we save that and go here, and we'll hit Control R, and let's see. Oops, I must have an error. Okay, so let's see what we got going on. So dot, oh, right here, I forgot the I. Control S. All right, Control R. All right, good. So now you can see that one's highlighted, and if I click on this one, you can see it's highlighting each of them as they are, right? You can see we got that nice little transition. That was that CSS we did earlier, where I did transition background color here. So from dot to this, because these two are background colors, it will transition the background color. Okay, so yeah, I think that is it. All right, so that's the end of that one. That one was pretty complicated. What I would suggest is just looking through the code and seeing, make sure yours looks similar to mine. You should be able to see it in the left there. That was a long video too. So just go ahead and go to the next one. And you're pretty much done.